Dokie. Right, so the intention, this spent some time with Arma 3, creating some 40k Machinima, if the title didn't give it away. Also gonna sit here and watch some Molly videos, because I just talked to a friend about Cowboy Bebop, the Netflix remake, and how fucking wackadoo it was. And I'm just in the mood to hear some good critiques of media. I actually don't think I finished The Force Awakens Part 3, so why not?
How does it feel to be part of the most anticipated movie of the year?
Pretty exciting. Really pretty exciting.
Really?
I think.
Very expensive.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to part 3 of a critique of The Force Awakens. Obviously, The Rise of Skywalker has been released in the middle of this analysis, and I'm sure that'll have a ripple effect on how everything is contextualized and rewrites were due. Hopefully that explains the strange timeline upon which these videos have been published, but with the additional
This is a cool
context
area.
and the time given for the editing to be completed, I should be able to present to you the best work that I can. Regardless, please check out parts 1 and 2 before 3 for context, unless you are new and you simply want to give this video a shot. And with that, let's move right along.
This is a Millennium Falcon. You're Han Solo.
I used to be.
Quite a poignant line, isn't it? Upon Han leaving the room, Finn shares Han's old rank as a rebellion general. A war hero, though Rey corrects him. She says he was a smuggler, which can be pretty frustrating for audience members. It compounds how much this new world forgot the old, while telling us that Han's exploits as general really weren't widespread or impactful enough for many
Yeah,
parts
that's a
of the
very
world to
good point.
remember.
And to see how she knows him as this epic, legendary scavenger.
It seems very unlikely that Rey would be completely unaware of Luke's existence beyond myth status, and despite that, she's fully aware of Han Solo being this epic smuggler. That really doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Han Solo, the rebellion general?
No, the smuggler.
If you're a famous smuggler, you're not doing it right.
I guess word of Han's time as a smuggler was more well known than his time fighting for the rebels, despite being with them for years, during which the Empire was crippled and removed of its position as overlord of the galaxy. That's how famous his ineptitude with smuggling has become.
Oh.
Alright, I guess that's how that works. What's next?
It's gonna do that when I pause. That was one of my biggest letdowns with seeing Han Solo in that state. I was really hoping to see something of a cynical veteran type of Han Solo, almost something more mercenary in a way, something evolved from his nature as a smuggler. Because I mean, at that time he had been fighting for decades. And with that much time, you could have written in so many things. Because the war didn't, the civil wars don't just end with one battle. They're usually long, arduous affairs that peter out, and it's not like both sides just leave. They have to learn to live against one another, or failing that, continue to fight until one or the other is dead completely. So, like, to think that the war just ended at Jakku, even, like, there should have been so many other large battles that he was a part of, because he was sort of like almost like a celebrity general at that point. Because what would you do if you were in the Rebel Alliance and you had any kind of pull? Imagine you were leadership. If you had big tasks, you would be like, oh shit, that's really important. Let's send the people who destroyed the Death Star just to make sure it gets done, you know? So, I don't know. It just seems like... It seems like if you're going to have a cynical Luke, you should have a cynical Han Solo to contrast, like, the common man who tried to keep up with the Jedi, who tried to keep up with the Jedi's own self-image of being a hero, and how that all trickles down as far as what Luke could accomplish, but also what were the side effects of what he tried to accomplish. Like there's some the Last Jedi tried to do a little bit of this, but it just fell so flat because it didn't actually portray these things. We didn't. There's so much assumed time that is not touched on, that is detrimental to trying to have a story set that far forward when these characters are seemingly trying to still fill the same roles that they had. And it's just, so Han Solo is a perfect example of this. Like, the fact that you would bring him up as a smuggler is just, like, it's an immediate callback to A New Hope, you know? Like, he stopped being just a smuggler rather quickly in the story. He became much more important. He became more involved. And he should wear something of that involvement, not just memories of being a smuggler, the first thing that the audience knows him for. It's very strange. It's very strange. Like I said, it should have been like a mercenary that was kind of like not Canderous necessarily, just because Canderous Ordo from Knights of the Old Republic, he loved what he did. He absolutely loved what he did. But maybe something like Canderous, where it's like the grizzled aspect of it, but somebody who didn't enjoy it that much. And maybe he had resentment. That would be like if you have to draw a line, like I wouldn't have wedged him and Leia apart for the sake of story. But if you have to do that, that could be one of the points of tension where it's just like he resents her for like getting him involved in this whole rebel business or something. You know, like there's so much that you could do there if you wanted to draw conclusions based on where we left those characters, but they didn't even try. They were just like, no, smuggler. He's the smuggle guy. Yeah. Oh yeah, fuck, gotta do something about that. Run it in window. A smuggle guy. Cool smuggle guy.
Right then. There are many moments in storytelling as a whole that act as a direct reference to their own histories. It could be a character, a location, or an event to elicit that sense of where it all began or what it means to have come this far. It's obviously intended to give the audience quite the bout of nostalgia, and that can be extremely effective, but it doesn't always work that way. There are many degrees of success in execution. Some properties can embarrass their predecessors by taking the event and changing what it originally meant. Some can sap their predecessor's legacy by using it to jumpstart their own. Some lead
What are we even gonna? What are we doing?
predecessors, evoking a strong sense.
I'm pro-heresy. I'm feeling pro-heresy. I saw some Facebook memes that were Imperial and they were cringe. And so I'm feeling the heresy in me. So I'm thinking maybe this place still looks too nice. Like I was gonna say maybe we convert this worker hab to like an ambush for Imperials, and that's like the goal of the Machinima. We find some good music, we kind of what we did with the Icket Claw thing, where it's just like we kind of build a scene and then very succinctly make it happen. But we don't even, like, what are we gonna do? I think the idea of, like, ambushes are just always good to film. You know, easy to have the order of operations there, like the establishing shots are just like you see them marching, you know, you just watch some people march and you can always make that thematic with the right lighting and the right conditions. And you don't need to show much of it. But like I said, it's easy to comprehend. It's easy to calculate. But we need to pick a location, and as I said, this place is far too nice looking. It's also very foggy. Ambush site. Would be a good ambush site. Could do something high ground here, maybe. I don't really like most of these terrain features, though. Like, these buildings don't look very 40k. Like, if I'm going to be on this map, use some of the interesting looking places. Like, this place has some has some destroyed buildings. I wonder if there's a more bombed out looking part. Just a few ruins scattered around. This might be a good spot here. Kind of like this. A little elevated ground here. Could maybe set up some kind of blind, maybe, like right here. Just like, yeah, dress up the road with more rubble. We could drop in some fire. Set it all at night. That would probably look pretty good. What do we have for artwork support props volume light? Spotlight, simple light placer. I was gonna say maybe something for the for these lights here, but I kind of like the idea of them just being out, because like the power grid is out or something else. This could be good here as far as approach for our Imperial victims. Nice and long too, so if we need, yeah, this could be good here. We'll go far back. What's this? We'll set up some kind of like staging area, maybe. That could be interesting if we did, not necessarily a briefing, but just showing them embarking and all that. For that, we would need an actual encampment. Just throw just a quick thing down. It's not indicative of the final thing, but just like to the thing. Just something around, like we could build it out this way as well. Just like this area here, this little U shape. We'll throw down some like rough barriers and then some garrison units just to mount weapons, perimeter, that kind of thing. And then we could show like some recon units, maybe. That could be one of the establishing shots, like coming down, just decrease elevation, and then we pan that way down. Like we have a controller, so we could do this variably, so it's not just like one speed like this. But like just quickly, we could just do like something like this, where it's just like meow, but very slowly. But we end something like here, showing a recon unit, and then we could 180, and then show the city. That's not the city, is it? Yeah, the city's over there. It's kind of hard to see, maybe. We could do it like this, where it's like, once we, okay, so we start in the camp. I usually like doing just like hard opens, just like you don't fade in or anything. You're just there in the thing. You're immediately experiencing whatever it is that you're supposed to be experiencing. In which case, I'm thinking maybe thinking maybe we do like an add attention kind of thing, where we're showing just like before everybody embarks, everybody's there with the commissar. We might even like stick him up on top of one of these buildings, and he's like looking down. You know, it's just like blah 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 blah. And we'll put let's say maybe put a gas mask on him just so that we don't have to show his face, so that we don't have to like worry about animated mouths or anything. But we could just like establish him and then turn him away before he actually starts speaking. As long as he animates as soon as he starts speaking, that should connect it easily enough to where it's not too weird. Maybe even like right here, maybe? No. It's not as good. This would look better probably. It's just kind of hard to imagine. You wouldn't be able to see him very well from over there. We might be able to put him just like on top of a tank. That would actually look pretty cool. Let's actually see if we can do that. Not Punisher, but maybe. Is there a Vanquisher variant somewhere? While we're here, let's grab a commissar. Our commissar. Sexy ass bolt gun. It's a new model. I've not seen that model before. It's amazing. That doesn't though. That looks like fucking trash. Why is that happening? Okay, that's key. Okay, really? 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 That's excellent. Excellent. Cannot have shadows. Fuck. It's quite limiting. Let's think. Let's think. What if we change? I keep trying to pull up the fucking. What if we change overall lighting? Let's see how that interacts. Oh my God, that's I like having hard shadows from these buildings and stuff, especially if we're gonna be using fire. Like that's would be really shitty to lose that. Let's see if we can throw it there. What does that do? Okay. Okay. It preserves that, at least. Let's see if it actually throws shadows, though. Because it looks like it just doesn't project shadows even from this light. So we need something that projects shadows in engine. Which, this is all in engine, but it's the only way I can really think, like, from the cameras. From not the cameras, but in the world's perspective. Not just the camera's perspective. Well, I just typed engine. Just type light. Does that produce light? Or a shadow, I mean? Doesn't look like it. size. We'll let's just double the size. How about that? And double the particle size? Why not? We need to be an observer for this. So let's go ahead and place our actual camera dude. Don't want the model shown, don't want it damage enabled, none of that. That's weird. Why? What? Okay. Down here, set a game master. All add-ons, forced interface, right click, sync, beggar. Now we're good. Let's go see. Commissar is a shadow.
Of progression and appreciation for a bygone era, and some use the potency of their predecessors to carve out something powerful and new in the present. It's in all forms of media, constructed with appreciation and love, or cobbled together with cynicism and greed. Star Wars The Force Awakens is a nostalgia-ridden roller coaster by design, so of course this phenomenon is present throughout the films. It's been highlighted already. When trying to give some form of a judgment on these events to determine a level of quality, we look at the mechanics that led to them and what was achieved by creating them. Were they earned, and what do they say? Let's look at Lord of the Rings. Spoilers for those who haven't seen the trilogy yet. J. Aragorn wielding Anduril is the direct result of Elrond knowing that his daughter's life is now tied to the fate of the One Ring. Arwen fell in love with Aragorn. That commitment comes with a heavy price, and despite that she remains committed. This, in addition to standing fast against Sauron's forces, challenges Elrond's lack of faith in men. If he is to help them, to give this corruptible race another chance while saving his daughter, then they will need resources. They will take the Dimmolt Road to seek those who dwell in the mountain, murderers, traitors, men who once betrayed the king that wielded the very sword that's reveal is the climax of this scene. If they should fight for the light in Middle-earth and win, Arwen and many other lives could be spared, and Aragorn could lead the people of Middle-earth to a new age, something he earned throughout his journey in these films. So, how many cylinders are firing for this scene? The sword is a direct connection to the opening of this trilogy. It represents how far we've come while reminding the audience of experiences they would have had as early as the prologue. It is the weapon that was used in the fight against Sauron, broken and reforged, ready to assault the darkness once again. It represents a significant level of support from one of the more cynical characters in the story, showing that there is still hope for the world of men. It represents the lifeline of a loved one and a chance to save her. It is recognition or even a milestone for Aragorn's actions and his journey, and it is a supremely powerful relic in this world. But most narratively relevant, it offers command of a bolstering force for winning an impossible war for life in Middle-earth. And yet, perhaps most meaningful of all, it will facilitate...
Okay, so that looks like it's just a daytime glitch for the shadows. Mainly because there aren't shadows here at night. Still, should be able to make this work. So a little bit of flicker, I thought. Oh, they actually turn on at night. Fire go. Okay, so seems that the shadow thing stops once the night technically starts. It's kind of the same thing. There's the opposite version of this map that's has like an atmosphere to it applied to it. Has a similar thing where at night the sky gets all fucked up. It's just a big graphics glitch. Okay, so this time of day is still good, which is good. Kind of start here as our base. kill the sky. Just want it overcast. We don't want stars. We also don't want rain. Right? It's not raining. Not even a little bit. Okay. Okay, so from here, so let's say we dress up the rubble, but that's a different place. We'll move our guy here. I'll try and set him up on that tank. See if we can even do that. We might be able to turn off simulation and stuff to actually make it work, but let me see if there's anything. No.
The atonement of a significant past betrayal, reinforcing one of the many themes of the entire trilogy, man's capacity for redemption. The plot, the world, the characters, and the themes are all exploding in this moment. It pays off in essentially every foundational category for storytelling. Meanwhile, we have something like Ready Player One, a film that would like to recreate a scene from The Shining because it's a character's 11th favorite horror movie. Do you remember that scene? Oh look, there's another scene from that movie. And another. It's an attempt to elicit the connection the audience likely has with that content, only to artificially attach that to this new content. Because if you can make an audience feel good at any cost to craftsmanship, that means you succeeded, right? The interesting element is that eliciting a sense of nostalgia out of your audience is easier the more powerful or revered that original reference was. However, the more this is attempted, the more the returns diminish.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
She'll be back. I'll be back.
I'll be back.
What?
I'll be back.
What past has caught up with me? I won't be back.
Though the death of the Terminator franchise is a whole other thing. The Lord of the Rings boasts a script that works
I won't be back. Did you really say that? Did you really say that? That's fucking hilarious.
Ready Player One is equipped with a script that shoehorns the
Oh,
Shining,
man.
among other things, in
Oh.
a blatant contrivance and a bungled reference.
A creator who hates his own creation. The Shining. And it's based on the best-selling book by Stephen King, who hated the movie.
The Shining movie was indeed maligned by Stephen King, but he didn't create the movie adaptation, he created the book. Stanley Kubrick created the Shining movie, and he didn't hate it. Neither did King hate the book that he wrote, making the reference, like all of those in Ready Player One, hollow and manipulative. So let's bring it back. Han Solo is reunited with the Millennium Falcon and the main title theme is played. This is a major blast of nostalgia. To see Han back in the cockpit of his now legendary ship that the audience haven't seen together for as long as 30 plus years. But why is this meaningful for him? Well, he arbitrarily lost his ship at some point and now he has it back because now is when he found it. None of that is explained beyond thin throwaway lines because this moment is exactly why this happened. It is yet another attempt at artificially attaching old emotions to new content. Han's reaction to seeing the cockpit is a result of significant contrivances, and rather than expressing that he is taking back what's his with triumph, he is expressing reverence, which happens to match how the audience likely feel. Put simply,
This chase is kind of a Star Wars wish fulfillment for these characters and for the audience that you get to
If we move.
and pilot and fire from. One of the great
Yeah, we'll have to move the vehicle to him.
feels as the creators believe the audience feels in order to simulate wish fulfillment. It's a form of catharsis, convincing the audience that they are getting their wish without having to do much of anything outside of a key jangle.
We're about to shoot the scene where it's just a little private
Fuck.
moment of him in the
So I guess that just breaks If you put them in the
This strategy worked wonders
in the vehicle, it breaks the animation loop.
Myself included, despite being delivered without support from the narrative itself. It's almost entirely a meta moment, and that exposes the goal they had. It's all very deliberate, careful, and corporate. Even still, there are more mistakes. Check out this clip from the documentary made about Episode 8 called The Director and the Jedi.
We made these dice, and apparently it's what Han Solo used to win the Millennium Falcon, so he's always kept him hanging up.
Well, someone didn't get that particular memo. According to the Han Solo movie, Han prevented Lando from cheating and he won the Millennium Falcon that way. The significance of the dice came from being a memento he provided his then girlfriend, and prior to that it was an item Han used to decorate his speeder. The Last Jedi made a rather big deal about these dice, which might have worked as a piece of Han Solo or something he valued had we known more about the dice in the first place. But the context provided by Solo makes this moment in The Last Jedi fiercely insulting. Why in the world would Luke Skywalker give his sister, the love of Han Solo's life, a token that represents Han's ex-girlfriend?
You have a problem with the dice?
I never watched Solo.
Oh,
I checked out a Star Wars before Solo.
Respectful to Leia to hand her a token of Han's previous relationship, dude.
Didn't have another one, neither did she.
Oh my god.
It's true.
Oh my god. They should just give Darth Maul the dice.
That would have been funny if she was just like, wait, what are these? I never noticed these.
These two dice represent your bottom and top half connected mechanically.
That would be beautiful. If anything, it should hurt. It should be like, thanks, man. That's the thing I needed when thinking about Han being dead.
All the things he could have made apparate, the dice.
What was better than the dice? I mean, I don't know.
Nothing is better.
Why?
Nothing would have been better.
Why?
Like actual nothing. If he wouldn't have given her anything, that would have been better than the dice.
I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I think it was nice.
You think holding her hand wouldn't have worked?
Why?
It showed that he cared about Han's death. He was sorry that he wasn't there to prevent it. It was just like a little, like, you know, I'm sorry about Han.
Memento of Han's previous relationship.
I miss my friend too. Dude, I don't know why you have to. Do you think Han had like a bunch of chicks after Leia? Or
no, we're going
like,
from that movie that came out, Solo.
We're going from the movie that exists.
Yeah, before Leia. That was like way before he met Leia.
That was our whole point.
Yes, that's the point.
So Kira should have been the one to get the dice.
Yes, if anybody should get the dice, Kira absolutely should get the dice.
That's true. Kira should have been the dice receiver. Yeah.
I always saw Han looking at him so lovingly. I think he really liked these dice. And
he always used to talk about the special woman connected to these dice, and I knew that was you.
And she's like, all right, wait, what? I get it, Luke. Shut up. God damn.
That's funny.
But it turns out the entire mess is just miscommunication within Lucasfilm. During The Force Awakens filming, a scene was organized in which Han places the dice on the Falcon, and there is an explanation that he won the ship with them.
Really?
This would help tie it all together if it was accompanied by an explanation for Leia to care about it beyond being a trinket of Han's history, but it was cut, and as we know, The Last Jedi was being written before TFA was finished, so I imagine it was in the original TFA script. Rian Johnson read it
Damn
as
it.
a very meaningful item for his sequel. Once The Force Awakens was released, or even beforehand, Rian would have seen the final cut, and upon realizing what was missing, chose to keep
like
this
the animation
same. Or he didn't
isn't.
spot that it was an
Damn it.
which is far more likely. This
Fucking damn it.
in filmmaking and communication on a production team-wide affair will absolutely cripple your story at the core. Just because it was your idea doesn't mean you can't alter it. I will never stop telling people to redraft their scripts for all kinds of reasons. One of many is that the things you do in the final portions of your script can be drastically altered by what you found you did in the opening portions.
Now that I do that, oh, I would have. I thought it was okay. Whatever. Let's see if it'll actually stay on the sponson.
Says that someone has placed a compressor on the ignition line and that the hyperdrive will now take more stress. At the end of the sentence, he and Rey finish it together.
I thought it was a mistake to put too much stress on the hyperdrive.
This is a clear method of showing that Rey knows her stuff, and it can function as a character realizing something about another in a natural way, opening their relationship up. Unfortunately, this is another attribute of Rey's to add to the list. She is adept at identifying the mechanical functions of the Millennium Falcon, with this skill extending to other ships of most kinds. A separate issue is that this is a large portion of Rey and Han's development already completed, only to be heavily banked upon later. The sad reality is that there is potential here. Like many elements of this story, they are rarely consistent and often
raise it up
behind.
just a little
Despite their
bit.
protests, Han decides to eject Finn and Rey.
Why does it do
He
that?
seems to be insulted at the prospect of helping them, almost as if he's behaving more like he would have in the
Okay, what if
opening
we
Hope.
put him down to his ankles? Will it raise it up just a tad bit?
That Han Solo could run away from his Star Wars roots.
To simply state that betraying his own roots is what Han Solo can or would do isn't enough. You can't just play with a developed and outright iconic character because you want to see a particular circumstance play out. We know this doesn't work. When put to paper, you have to be respectful and justified, or you will not fit inside an existing story, damaging both your own content and the content that gave you this opportunity. Coming back to the scene, Han stops at the mention of Luke Skywalker, but before we explore that, we discover that Han and Chewie's carrier that has the Falcon inside is being boarded. Now let me clarify. 119 seconds from the moment that Han meets Finn and Rey, the ship gets boarded by two different factions that Han is meant to be doing a smuggling job for, each. How unlucky. Han is unable to barter with these people. He doesn't even try offering the Rathtars, being that they must have some value if he's smuggling them. He also struggles to even begin talking his way out of it. He's mostly just walked over during this scene. They then say that his game is old.
Your game is old. There's no one in the galaxy left for you to swindle.
I really wanted to see that Han was at the end of his rope, that he had been running and gunning the way we might have expected, and now he is literally at death's door. There is nowhere left for him to run, and he's wanted in every corner of the galaxy.
JJ wanted to show that Han was essentially defeated. After all this time, he managed to run up a debt with everyone in the galaxy, and there's nowhere left to run. As if to say the OT made it clear that he wasn't very good at his job, when that was clearly not the case.
It's pretty good.
Commentary also implies that Han's debt to Jabba
And just get that left foot a little more exposed. That'll look good.
Nor his desire to be free of the Empire. Rather, it was Han's incompetence as a smuggler, despite the fact that he did complete the job and get the money he earned. And now his owing Jabba has apparently been taken to the nth degree. Han Solo simply owes everyone in the galaxy.
There's no one in the galaxy left for you to swindle.
Han wasn't a swindler or a liar. He was harshly honest, if anything. This is a staggering misread of
Put some lights up.
Han lost his shipment for Jabba because
Maybe an
he was
APC
avoiding the
as a
Empire.
light.
He eventually earned the money back for
Wait,
Jabba.
let me
He
figure that one
didn't
out.
cheat him. The issue was his position as outlaw and his investment in his friends and the Rebel Alliance.
Actually.
Sir, the temperature's dropping too rapidly. That's right, my friend's out in.
Anyway, Rey
Fuel.
and Finn end up staying beneath the floor
Headlight.
to avoid being seen. From
What?
there, one of the factions points out that Han owes money to both his own crew and another crew,
Hopefully.
leading to him introducing them.
That sorts itself out. That's very strange.
This could work as a reveal if not for the fact that it makes no sense.
yeah,
How is it that Han was aware that he was boarded but only knew about one ship instead of both? How is it that one faction knew when
Maybe
the
off
other
to
one
the
was going
side.
to open their side of the ship? This scene is played for a lot of laughs despite the rampant death, so perhaps I'm not supposed to be paying
Rampant
that much attention,
death.
but it is a blatant piece of inconvenience just after we got a heavy convenience for our protagonists. These are really starting to stack up. On top of this, the factions are both aware of the First Order hunting a BB unit and 2 fugitives. This is never confirmed as a bounty, but I imagine it functions as one since these factions probably wouldn't show so much interest otherwise.
So the idea is that not only are these gangs working together, but now you realize they're working in league with the First Order.
Oh wow, you say that like it just makes sense. Both parties actually work together, which makes it rather curious for them to open up separate contracts with Han or even allow a second contract when Han hasn't come through on the first. On top of that,
Is that what is implied?
To Han instead of capturing him immediately. The scene implies
Nice.
that they don't care whether Han had what they wanted, and if they work for the First Order, then of course they have to capture
Perfect.
Han. I mean, Han is wanted
Damn
across the galaxy.
perfect.
The First Order would obviously want him at that point, not to mention that he is responsible for the destruction of 2 Death Stars. I imagine they have quite a hatred for him, which means these 2 factions would surely capture him the moment they initially met. At the very least, they would make the First Order aware of the situation instead of waiting until they've escaped. Judging from the scene, it's not like they wanted the Raftars. Come to think of it, who would have hired an elderly man and his dog to capture enormous man-eating meatballs?
I say that lights are right there.
That they've actually managed to capture a lot of these things, so maybe
maybe
the team that caught them have all died in the process.
Let's get him on board.
You used to have a bigger crew.
Sadly, this disaster of a scene is not over, folks. First, as I've brought up before,
I guess I could manually go in there and set the lights up.
Sight of the Millennium Falcon right now, being that they were parked over Jakku and they had men in the field with comms that would have established what kind of ship they're in and what coordinates they left on to give a Star Destroyer enough space and time to lock them down. This is before you realize that these 2 factions work with the First Order as well. Despite that, the First Order themselves do not board the ship. They are nowhere to be seen. Like I said, they are only contacted once the Falcon escapes. Secondly, just try and follow this nonsense. It is established that the First Order want to chase and capture our heroes more than anything. But that doesn't matter because the film goes out of its way to show that the First Order simply cannot find them moments later, despite having a strong tracker as well as many visuals of the ship and direct communication with the people on the carrier. But that doesn't matter because a new faction
so fucking stupid
works with the First Order begins chasing them anyway. But that doesn't matter because they are easily avoided and never show up again, leaving our heroes free and clear regardless. But that doesn't matter because someone else, loyal to the First Order, alerts the First Order to our hero's location, bringing the First Order back into the plot. If it's not crazy, I'm trying to highlight that instead of using a simple logical progression, we keep getting concessions to overcome every obstacle in real time. Each edition has to bend and break rules to overcome the last, when all they needed was Kylo Hux and their troopers chasing them consistently, as opposed to generating a new faction that apparently works with them anyway. The former would actually support the First Order's intimidation factor instead of having it deflate regularly. They could be using the scanner that Han alludes to in a future scene. They could be using a tracker that a certain other person invented. And this scene could have been Han helping Finn and Rey escape the First Order to get his ship back instead of these random laughingstock factions.
Still not seeing any lights.
Factions in Star Wars are very aware of the First Order, yet we've been given no information in terms of what's being done about the crimes that the First Order consistently commit against other factions. The Starkiller base is apparently shrouded in secrecy, so why is the entire galaxy allowing them to run rampant? Is Jakku relevant to the New Republic?
That's what that part is, but
Jakku soil an
I mean, everything else functions, right?
General factions just don't seem to like the First Order much, and the idea that the First Order are covert is entirely out of the question. Plenty of major players know about their misdeeds, and some are blatantly connected to the Resistance. Why was nothing done to stop them at this point?
Guess there's just no lights at all.
They are trying to resurrect. Why aren't there more discussions of past wars and
failures
in terms of stopping them? Fourthly, the only reason that these gangs suspect that Han is harboring the fugitives is not because they're in the area that the Falcon had previously been spotted by the First Order. Instead, it's because they recognize the BB unit from the information about the fugitives. Well, if Finn and Rey are rightfully going below to hide, then why not send BB-8 down there with
a different unit?
Knows that the First Order are specifically
because these... Oh, I thought these had floodlights on them. I know that you can put floodlights on the Lehman Russ.
He's staying with you, but why?
Okay, so Imperial Guard. Not that one.
That's why. Finally, the absolute inconvenient timing of having both of these factions show up just seconds after Han initially arrived is evidence of the ADHD this script is suffering from. It requires constant action to stay satisfied, which means they just keep adding more to the plot, making it contradictive and downright ridiculous. That's not to say the film lacks any calm scenes in which the plot can settle instead of being rushed forward. Coincidentally, those scenes are of much higher quality.
Chimera looks wild.
Now, if we hold on a second and go back before the bigger drama of this scene happens, Han says,
Oh, great. Sequavian death gang. Must have tracked us from then, too.
This is a throwaway line, and shockingly, I have a lot to say about
awesome.
it. This line has been written to explain that not only do these factions exist, but that they happen to be on Han's trail right before he got here, and that they have arrived now. This is meant to explain why the drama is about to take place, but all it really does is kick the can down the road.
It's so cool
Where
looking.
is this other place, and how did they find Han
That
there
is
in order
so
to track
fucking
him
cool
here?
looking.
This inconvenience
I might
is
make
explained by
one in on a desert map just out of those.
Not explained. And
Those are
so
cool.
I really don't understand throwaway lines like this. They're a complete waste of an opportunity to soften poorer plot points and repair your story, assuming it's even in a state that lends itself to that. When crafting throwaway lines, you need to connect to elements that already exist, thus creating a sense of cause and effect through as natural a dialogue as you can when the story starts to appear thin. So what can we do here? Well,
Anyway,
these factions can be
does
in
not
the
look
First
like
Order's
it.
employ, and Han deals with mercenaries, smugglers, and bounty hunters all the time in his line of work. Let's use those pieces of information in a discussion that already exists, while altering a lot of it to include some throwaway lines. When Han sees the ship on the terminal, he could say, "Damn, how'd Tasu Leech find us this far out? First Order got a base on Jakku?"
The First Order came for us. We have to get BB-8 to the Resistance. Who's Tasu Leech?
An old friend and a mercenary.
He works with the First Order.
He stays where the money is, but if they're sending him, they don't know you're here. With those few lines, we've connected pieces of information about Han's profession to a new character, one of the many people that Han would know in this galaxy. This character can now represent a new faction with their own culture, boosting the world building, on top of sharing insights about Han's life up till now in subsequent
I don't like
careful
just
dialogue.
pointing
In addition, we acknowledge that the First Order has
on
lost the
turret
location
right
of
at the
Falcon
commissar,
ships
though.
orbiting Jakku are all being checked by the nearby stars.
That looks a little weird to me.
Different units. This new character was sent as a talented mercenary with an experienced crew that is familiar with Han Solo and his abilities as a smuggler, making him a strong candidate to successfully capture Han Solo, enemy of the Empire,
that's cool.
for the First Order, while possibly finding the other fugitives. This explains why these people were in the area, why they arrive on Han's ship, and why we don't see stormtroopers arrive instead despite the First Order being aware of the ship. We also allow a new character from Han's history with similar reasoning to Lando's introduction in Empire. We also have all of the pieces for Han to have a verbal and physical confrontation with someone who knows him relatively well, thus providing an action scene. But before that, during their back and forth, you can explore any element that remains weak while adding plenty of new tidbits to strengthen the pieces that are missing between
We could just
the
add
trilogy and the new
headlights.
trilogy. And so what you end up with is a few throwaway lines that set up
we could just
opportunities
add
for
headlights.
exploration, pushing the plot, and providing an opening for world building.
Hold on now.
It was based on what we knew, and it now makes something ridiculous seem a lot more reasonable. Your new action scene can involve Rey using a terminal to assist
These have,
her
yeah,
with
these do have
cover,
headlights.
banking on her established mechanic knowledge. Finn can cover Han and Chewie during the battle while trying to remain level-headed in avoiding any lethal shots to the enemies. This can be something Han notices and explores with Finn in a future scene, leaving us with Han and Chewie making strong use of their weapons.
Let's see if this actually reacts with enable headlights.
Is still talented and dangerous. With this, we can drop the Rathars and shave the
What's
scene
going
down
on?
while keeping every substantive detail that was there to begin with. However, performing
It
script
doesn't look like it's gonna work.
because there are so many more foundational elements to alter if we wanted something functional. The point of what I was doing here is actually more broad than that.
Oh, great. Sequavian death gang. Must have tracked us from then, too.
See, the goal with this line was to reassure the audience that something in the script that seems ridiculous is absolutely logical. The issue is that they had no basis for it other than, well, Han probably gets tracked. People do tracking. Boba Fett did it. Obi-Wan did it. Other people probably do it. But by this logic, anyone can turn up anywhere at any time. The failing would come in realizing that the two aforementioned instances of tracking weren't random at all.
There will be a substantial reward for the one who finds the Millennium Falcon. But I want them alive. No disintegration.
There are countless examples of throwaway lines across many stories wherein the writers are trying to make up for missing groundwork or prep for something ridiculous and thus create a small piece of information forced in at just the right time to act as an excuse. For example, what do you do if the only
It's both working and not working. The fuck? Why is that there? What the fuck? It produces fake. And a controller here. Get that nice variable. Yeah, that's smooth. That's what's up. That's so shit. Like, why? Why is that there? This would be pretty decent otherwise. Just the lighting itself. The atmosphere itself is pretty bland. Did we make it rain? Night rain is always pretty thematic. It's so fucking weird that it does that with the headlights. Like, I don't get that at all. Actually, we might be able to change the attitude. Instead of relying on that bugged fucking thing, we could do this. We could fuel out so they don't move. And then we go to the AI, group AI. Attributes. And it is careless, maybe? Vehicles follow and use lights. Yes. Okay, so hopefully that means whenever it starts, whenever the AI initializes, they'll cut their lights on. We don't have to deal with that fucking thing.
Escape you can come up with for your two young characters in Jurassic World is to fix a broken Jeep when there is no previous indication that they could possibly do so.
You remember when we fixed up Grandpa's old Malibu, right?
Yeah?
That's a throwaway line designed to explain an ability that has a significant effect on the plot because average children are not typically expected to know how to repair a Jeep that's been out of commission for more than 20 years. They could have alluded to this in the opening of the film. The father could have celebrated his son's performance in personal driving lessons and repairs as they were preparing to leave. That kind of parental appreciation could have been brought on as a subtle farewell to the typical family activities that are soon to be interrupted as a result of the impending divorce shown in that film. But we got this instead, probably because it was seen as a small problem in the script that a throwaway line can fix, but it was based on almost nothing we knew. Well then, what about when you've introduced all of the important superpowered characters in your story, but there's one you forgot, and the plot is moving along without her? You're gonna have to explain her abilities, right?
Alright, we figured it out.
This is Katana. Her sword traps the souls of its victims. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn. She's got my back.
This is so awful it's been memed into history, and it's likely due to forgetting to give this character a triple intro like the rest of those in the film. Instead, they opted to introduce her right before everyone leaves to begin the second act, if you can call it that. The natural implication being that she was forgotten up to that point in the script, and so, based on nothing, we get an info dump in the form of a few throwaway lines for someone who is very important to this team. Just awful. But then again, we are talking about Suicide Squad.
Here comes Slipknot, the man who can climb anything.
The man who can climb
What about a film that's considered a masterpiece by many?
Hostile? I see you hostile.
A murder attempt that failed because a gun happened to jam. How do you explain that kind of luck?
Carbon fiber, 28 caliber, made in China. If you want to kill a public servant, Mr. Maroney, I recommend you buy American.
Buy American? The gun is Chinese-made carbon fiber, therefore unreliable, and therefore jammed? And that doesn't even come close to explaining how he got a carbon fiber pistol into the prison system, and then through the modern detectors and a pat-down for the courtroom. Throwaway lines like these can be rather frustrating because we know by listening to them that the creators have written themselves into a corner that they nevertheless want to get past in order to get their payoff. So they threw a line into the script to try and smooth out the progression of events to allow the payoff to proceed. They are often used to explain immediately adjacent events.
The heavy rain sound.
Writers will establish setups through many mechanics in the script, leading to payoffs that come far later. The audience will have the time and knowledge to understand the event while remaining engaged by the payoff instead of being distracted by it. Why can John Connor hack into this security system near the end of Terminator 2, allowing them to access the key that opens the security door that gives them a chance to destroy the arm and the chip that would have led to Judgment Day? Well, he's shown to be a delinquent who's broken into security systems to steal money for a decent amount of time. This is a result of being raised by a mother whose perspective is that survival at any cost is all that matters. John will save the world, which is a position that is thoroughly informed by the prior film. How about another example? Why was Mike able to record and expose Mr. Waternoos's nefarious scheme in Monsters, Inc.? Well, Waternoose was drawn into the room that was established for training simulations that record playback of good and bad quality scaring tactics to help monsters learn how to improve. Alright then, why was Taken able to take back his daughter by taking out the takers who decided to take her because they regularly take foreign visitors in Taken? Well, it was established that he was a retired wet work CIA agent with decades of experience, and he still indulges in a part-time job that calls for these abilities. Add that to friends who are remnants of that history capable of assisting him, and you get every piece of information.
I wonder if we could find a more animated
script. The problem that should become obvious with these comparisons is not only how much more flesh is placed on the setups, but the proximity to their purpose in the script. If you place specific
these are just the people around
to occur despite being almost impossible moments before or after that event occurs, then you haven't repaired the script. Like I said previously, you simply kicked the can down the road. Despite that, throwaway lines will be used to solve potentially devastating events like a character dying or being hopelessly lost or not being given any screen time at all.
Okay,
or
yeah,
they could be used to generate drama
fine
where
for
none
now.
exists. The reason I said I don't understand lines like these is because they are built to strengthen the script when in reality they highlight weaknesses that need to be corrected from the ground up. It's incompetence or just some bad luck in production, but the result is the same.
Alright, let's set up the guys.
That many of you may be asking what a good throwaway line would be. Well, the idea is the same as my made-up lines for The Force Awakens. The lines are meant to strengthen connections that already exist, to change contrivances into cause and effect. This ultimately confirms elements that were only thin and previously inferred by the audience. For example, what if, in your story, you have a group of people who are trying to get to a jet and another group of people who must capture those who are running, leading to a big battle? How do we connect up these two teams at just the right time? Well, on the chasing team, we have several resources for general surveillance, but they are mostly out because of the awareness of those elements from the running team. This leaves us with the fact that the protagonist is having a love interest deliver his gear, ready for the ride on the jet that will take them to the fight they are looking for. That means this character will be able to lead anyone to the running team, so do we have anyone on the chasing team that shows interest in Cap's love life?
You know, if you ask Kristen out from statistics, she'd probably say yes.
That's why I don't ask.
Oh, wait, what about that girl from accounting? Laura?
Lillian. Lip piercing, right?
Yeah, she's cute.
Yeah.
Okay, but do they work for the same person? Would they even be aware of each other?
I'm assigned to protect you.
On whose order?
His.
Aha, well, this person would have to be experienced in espionage.
I want you to meet Agent Romanoff.
Huh?
I'm a S.H.I.E.L.D. shadow. Once we knew you were ill, I was tasked to you by Director Fury.
But even then, the chasing team would still have to evacuate the entire airport, and they have to start doing it after the running team arrive or they'll be tipped off too early. Well, sure, evacuate the entire airport as soon as the running team arrive, but start with the hangar bay. It shouldn't take much longer than a few minutes, and that's about as much as Cap will need to get his team suited up, leaving no time for the running team to escape via the airport, nor to escape in general, forcing a showdown. We can show this with a throwaway line about the evacuation, and a confirmation that they have to fight their way out.
We're evacuating the airport.
Stark.
Stark? Suit up.
What's clever about that moment is that Bucky was the one to translate the German announcement for the evacuation. That makes a lot of sense since he's a Winter Soldier and they speak 30 languages.
I'm not the only Winter Soldier. They speak 30 languages, can hide in plain sight, infiltrate, assassinate, destabilize.
So with all those pieces set up for the audience in less than overt ways, all we need now is a line to let people know about the connection in case they miss it.
25
So
right
how do
there.
we do that? Well, we can put in a throwaway line at the end of the relevant scene with a cut to the person being referenced in the dialogue.
You know where they are.
I know someone who does.
And there we have it. The through line was present, but now it's highlighted through some small yet important lines. But is it the
50.
kind of writing that can be picked up by all audiences?
Like Captain America's in the airport parking garage assembling his crew together so they can fight the bad guy without government interference, and somehow Iron Man finds him there and evacuates the entire airport within like a minute?
It's not picked up every time, but when we give a script a more thorough analysis, we can appreciate the craft regardless.
It's 100.
Incidentally, you should all watch YMS's video on Kimber the White Lion. It's an incredibly detailed video exploring the claims of plagiarism in relation to the Lion King. He goes through a huge amount of context, be it the movies and shows tied to the content in question throughout the years, interviews, production details, TED Talks, and just about everything in between, with the goal of discovering just what was copied, what was lied about, and what was missed, and how there could be any other explanations for patterns people are spotting. Considering I was one of the many people who didn't know much of anything about Kimber while happily agreeing to the idea that Disney may have taken much of what we ended up enjoying about The Lion King from it, it was very informative, entertaining, and eye-opening.
You all right?
I think it's one of the best videos YMS has ever made, and you should check it out. Link in the description. Anyway, all of this stuff is essentially me explaining why I love throwaway lines. They are a fantastic writing tool, though oftentimes they are used incompetently. And with that out of the way, let's move on. In an attempt to trap both gangs, Ray pulls some fuses and the Raptors are accidentally released. These things are essentially giant balls of organic creature meat with an enormous mouth, complete with snappy tentacles that pull people in to eat. During the slapstick adventure, Han punches a random guy to then throw him into the Raptor's mouth, which is fine, but I can't help seeing the cuts they make for this movement. I reckon it would have looked really good if it was all in one, having the action ground the CGI monster into the scene a bit more, but we do the whole cut thing. Either way, Harrison was clearly very concerned with the project looking good in completion, considering how much he loves the character of Han Solo and how much investment he's shown for the Solo.
Let's just actually make it a little. Let's actually make it a little darker.
Movie featuring a young Han Solo. I don't know what to think about that.
Oh my God! Get out of my chair! Get out of my life!
Are you looking forward to watching a Han Solo movie as a fan?
Not really.
Ray and Finn, during their escape attempt, bump into a
Marcus was like, that was a stupid fucking question.
By the creature, and Ray opens her mouth far wider than usual to display concern. She then runs after the Rathtar to try and, well, I don't know what her plan is here, to be perfectly honest. She doesn't have a weapon. She would likely have been swept up with Finn, considering the number of tentacles on this thing, but of course it chooses not to and gets out of her ability to chase it. Fortunately for Finn, Ray finds a control panel and she's able to operate the emergency blast doors, shutting one down as the Rathtar carries Finn across it, freeing him.
They had me! With the door!
That was lucky!
When she does save Finn's life here, she takes none of the credit, and it's just that sweet thing of we're back together again.
Rey is so good, she is saving lives while refusing the chance to be appreciated for it. Why couldn't you have Rey swept up by the Rathtar here and have Finn use a console to save her? Why does Rey have to be the hero in each of these scenes rather than making it a team effort? Later in the script, she rescues herself. Also, why do you need this ridiculous spectacle that's actively making me question so much about the characters?
The storytelling is so clear, and I'm surprised how emotional I guess it was. JJ didn't sacrifice character for spectacle in any way.
I'd also like to highlight that Finn was not killed by the Rathtar immediately like the others have been.
Oh fuck, we need to get
we see the better, but sometimes
something a little more variable.
Break that stereotype, and it's quite refreshing. This leads to Han then picking up the bowcaster and shooting the remaining mercenaries.
You okay?
Wow. That reaction seems a little unlikely considering how long these two have been together, but we can talk about that a little later. Rey informs Han about his own ship again and tells him he needs a co-pilot, which is interesting considering that she so readily piloted alone mere minutes ago. Han makes yet another mistake, and Rey has to clear it up for him so that they can begin their jump to hyperspace. But this is natural. Everybody makes mistakes.
Really?
For instance, when Rey released the Rathtars, it is framed as a mistake. She hit the wrong fuses.
Oh no.
On a what?
Wrong fuses.
Except Rey's mistake results in every character on her team making it out alive and many of the enemies being swallowed up. Her mistake facilitated their success. Something to keep in mind. Han engages the hyperdrive and travels through partway of the hangar doors and part of a Rathtar.
Is it slowly going down now?
Because it was very much a cinematic spectacle to behold, but that caused a discrepancy of both universal mechanics and character.
We're going out of here at light speed.
From inside the hangar, is that even possible?
I never asked that question until after I've done it. Not precise calculations, we fly right through a star or spiral sequence to a supernova and then it enters the real quick.
Something that will be discussed once we
There's always a little, there's always some little fucking quirk that I gotta troubleshoot through or something. Always. What the? Okay, what about, why are there 3 switches for each trigger? Okay. It's like, it is variable now, like we can do it at like a slow speed and then a fast speed, which is what we need to have a nice smooth camera. It's just, why the fuck is it doing it like that? This is just up and down, so why? Don't need that. Get rid of that. Yeah. Can we? Why does it do that? Falling. Because it's not that it's... What about the control scheme is making it slowly fall but not slowly rise? Like, why would it? I mean, the similar inputs. So what the fuck is going on? Why would it do that? Let's delete all this other shit. How about that? Maybe that's what's causing it. Please let that be what's causing it. The only thing that makes sense. I wish we could like integrate that, but we're always gonna have this like, yeah, I don't always want like this weird downward. Sometimes I just want a steady pan from left to right. So it's not gonna do it. Why the fuck is it doing that? It's so fucking weird. That's so fucking weird. I don't have even the slightest clue why it would be doing that. Not even a little bit. Up, down. It's not getting input. Like, it's acting as if one of these analog controls are just like getting some constant input. These fucking things have like a fucking like an auto click kind of thing going on, but for like in a dumb way. Okay, I tried the third setting and it did give a different input in this. So like, because like, see, for now it's not even doing it. If it's T1 at T2, still doesn't do it. T3 still doesn't do it. Does it have to? Okay. Okay. There's that. That's T3. Responds on T3, but not T1. T2. Still does on T2. Alright, so let's try. The input is still the same there. Down. That's so strange. That's so fucking strange. What's that? I don't even know what that is, but it looks like that should be filled. Did that just solve the issue? That just... a weird angle of it. Oh my god, I don't get it. I don't care though. Okay, so now we can do all the shit we need to do. Need more soldiers. Isn't nearly compelling enough. We need soldiers that stretch off into the shadows there, I think. That might look good enough. Face more this way. Yeah. Okay, never mind. That is our max entity count there. Lightning. Some lightning. A little bit of fog, a little bit more fog. It's pitch fucking black without light. Okay. And those lights come on. It's kind of hard to light the scene when you can't look at the scene until the scene is happening. So let's just throw some lightning in there.
That presents rules in relation to hyperdrive.
Inform the First Order that Han Solo has the droid they want.
As soon as we figure something out.
One of the two factions makes a call to ensure the First Order knows where the droid is and who has it, though we don't see him again. But we do see this method of providing information, once before, and then again and again. This can be quite boring for an audience member. These pieces of connecting tissue in the script are not brought on by something dynamic that relates to an environment or a character. Rather, they were spotted and reported on. It's not that it doesn't make sense, it's simply less satisfying for many people.
Wait a minute.
I'm gonna go get a drink. Be right back.
You could have had stormtroopers be the ones that boarded Han's ship in the first place. They could have been led by Captain Phasma, and she could have had a history with Han. I understand that I am now advocating for the destruction of my previous repairs, but they were always contingent
Much
that
better.
nothing else really changed, which is not an option when it comes to repairing this story. I will be speaking on this topic more and more as we progress, but Han Solo in mere minutes has taken quite the beating in terms of character consistency. He can't even remember who he owes money and who he's failed to pay in the past.
Have I ever not delivered for you before? Yes. What was the second time?
But I'm
Be a
sure
tank
they're hoping for that little
driving through,
the idea that it's
right in front of everything.
to be placed on a character or group of enemies permanently, as long as it had you laughing.
We want our money back now.
You think hunting Rathgars is cheap? I spent that money.
Han says that he hasn't got their money because he spent it hunting Rathtars. But if he's using that as an excuse, then surely that means they are the people he's getting the Rathtars for. For example, if my landlord asked me for my rent and I said getting groceries is expensive, why would I expect the landlord to care? Unless, of course, I was buying them on the landlord's request specifically. Comparatively, why would these factions care whether it's costly to capture Rathtars unless they were the people he was capturing them for? In which case, surely capturing 3 of them would be proof
Or
that
some
he's
special
not only doing
forces.
the job that they hired him for,
Like,
but that
yeah,
he can
let's do some
actually provide
special
at
forces.
least some of the payment. But the scene is strange because Han makes it clear that the Rathtars are for someone else.
I got 3 of them going to King Prana.
3?
So who
Nah,
knows
dang.
what's going on? Though before we close out on this scene, I would like to highlight the dialogue, or at least part of it. Han, being the sort that can talk his way out of anything, is dealing with mental masters, and he is of course defeated. As we lose focus on the particular back and forth of the scene, you hear quite the exchange.
How long we known each other?
The question is how much longer will we know
A lot of them.
Not long.
Sublime. Anyway, coming back to this guy, the only reason we saw him share this information so bluntly is to set up the following scene. The introduction of a character that is going to be the focal point for every significant change since the original trilogy.
But seriously, is there a reason for the hair
I
storyline?
think there is. I think that it speaks to who she is. You know, not directly, but it is very fitting. Her entire look is very fitting.
Introducing Supreme Leader Snoke, shrouded in mystery, sat upon a throne from which he commands the First Order. Snoke is, apparently, the being that brought the First Order to their current position while smacking down Luke and the new Jedi Order, whatever that was. This sort of thing can work just fine depending on how it's supported, which of course we will get to one day. Kylo, Hux, and Snoke are discussing strategy now that the heroes have escaped, and it's made clear that they got away as a result of Hux failing to capture the droid.
The droid will soon be delivered to the Resistance, leading them to the last Jedi.
I take full responsibility.
Personally, I think sending 2 stormtroopers and 2 fighters was more to blame for the escape, not to mention losing the escapees for no reason, both when they crash-landed and when they left the planet, but there we are. It's very odd that Hux takes the blame here when Kylo clearly has power over the First Order to send out units too. As I said previously, Kylo was placed on the character shelf only to be let free again later. We already know that he would be in personal pursuit of the droid with how much investment he has in the map, and yet here he is, sat in some room staring at a wall of lights.
I want that map. For your sake, I suggest you get it.
He seems to be aware of the situation, meaning he was fine with sending such a small number of troopers for this job, but the distance he takes from this mission makes him free of blame because he also complains about Hux's abilities. It's just so confusing to put together, but I suppose it does lend credence to those who say Hux was always incompetent.
Supremely.
When looking at Hux as it stands, we are seeing a confident yet relatively arrogant general, singular in his goals. The only time he shows significant concern is when the planet he is standing on is about to explode. When up against Kylo and Snoke, he stands up for himself. He holds his own. But the choice to send such a tiny force to retrieve the droid doesn't make sense. If anything, you would expect Hux to overcompensate. He would likely send an army to pick up a map, like he and Kylo did in the beginning. Unless that opening was exclusively organized by Kylo? You know, he spearheaded the mission and overcompensated only to now leave it to Hux, even though they do seem to share command in this film, but who knows how that'll look in the future. Staying on Hux, though, his disposition and failures in The Last Jedi translate as though they are a retcon of his character precisely because he's contradicting what we know about him, choosing to target an uninhabited base rich with documents for the taking rather than a closer, mobile base that contains the vast majority of the living resistance. Or how about choosing to engage in a slow chase when many other options are available? Apparently, he also understands hyperdrive ramming but doesn't see it coming until it's far too late. And So, on top of that, he has all of his ideas thrown into the dirt because he's so pathetic and it's now played for laughs. This is the only decision that comes close to failure in The Force Awakens, and I don't think one could define it that way with the very strange information that we're provided. So, to explain the choices made by Hux in The Last Jedi, we have to staple a trait of utter incompetence onto him to prevent our cognitive dissonance. Does that sound familiar? Either that, or they're making a trait that's the First Order. Anything could happen. Though to bring us to my point, let's go on a tangent and cross-reference with a scene from The Last Jedi. When discussing Holdo's decisions throughout the film, she refuses to tell Poe the plan because she believes him reckless and the plan would be a danger to his tolerance. This is not a completed line of logic from Holdo to the audience. This is why many assumed she was a villain or a mole before the subversion takes place. There is no clear
We change the AI attitude.
Poe would do with the knowledge of the plan. There would be no reason to assume Poe would tell the First Order, despite, of course, the information slipping out thanks to Finn, meaning this isn't a decision from necessity. Rather, it is a petty concern she harbors as a result of a judgmental view of Poe Dameron, a view that is later shown to be irrelevant compared to other feelings she has for him.
I like him. Me too.
But it's worse even than that, because he ends up asking not for the details, but that there is a plan at all, that there is hope.
Now we're down to one ship and you've told us nothing. Tell us that we have a plan, that there's hope.
And she still refuses to say anything other than a platitude. She would rather have people believe that the several deaths up to that point are part of the plan. This leaves her crew despondent and frustrated, leading to a mutiny with more members than just Poe. It also leaves the audience confused as to whether she just doesn't like Poe excessively, or any of the crew for that matter, or she's just straight up evil, which is once again contradictive writing that enables the subplot and the final act. But even if we ignore that, Poe opts to save the Resistance, engaging in a plan he then tells Holdo about, and what she wants. Only she reacts with outrage, hoping to put a stop to his plan, which naturally pushes Poe to make a decision that will save everyone's lives.
I'm gonna bad spot on the road to have a vehicle come through.
With his fellow Resistance members. And this is where we have to pause to have this interaction understood by everyone for how poorly written it was and how horrifically written it gets. In this scene, Holdo knows that using the hyperdrive would mean putting everyone in the Resistance in a guaranteed grave. So let's play it out. They speed off with no base to securely reach. The First Order is going to speed right after them with the tracker, and this time they will have no fuel, leading to their obliteration. There is nothing worse than that outcome. Having one person in an escape pod while that happens would be a preferable plan. So something has to be done. Holdo recognizes that through Poe's decision to take over the ship and take control of the command center, he will push the lever to enter hyperspace and damn them all to death. And he gets extremely close to doing so. This means that during the mutiny scene, Holdo had a choice. She didn't have a good choice, but she had a choice. Tell Poe the plan now and save everyone's lives, even at the risk of the plan leaking through Poe to someone at some point, or stay silent and everyone dies. Even at the risk of Poe being a mole, he will tell the First Order her plan, sure, but that would result in a fight on Crate as opposed to the immediate obliteration of the Resistance. Which do you think is the better choice? Besides, there's no mention of her believing he's a mole in the film. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But the narrative and the framing is screaming at us that she's right to keep the plan from him, despite all logic pointing the other way. And so people defend it at all costs.
Holdo not telling Poe her plan, do you genuinely think that that's like fine?
Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all.
So, would your reasoning be because she doesn't trust him?
Yep.
So why doesn't she tell anyone else?
We don't know who she tells.
Okay.
Right.
Why doesn't she tell him the plan once he knows that the transports are being fueled? What difference would it make?
The idea of something being framed to make sense and to be righteous despite everything in the narrative pointing the other way is a whole subject on its own. And for some reason, Disney Star Wars has it in spades. How about a reverse example where something is framed to be bad despite being the best choice they had? In the beginning of The Last Jedi, Poe made the right choice, and yet he is punished by a demotion and a slap. That framing alone, the way the narrative presents that decision being condemned, is enough for people to simply believe it was a bad decision despite the reality of the situation.
What did he do before that was reckless? The thing that got him slapped by Leia.
What was that? What that he did that got him slapped by
Taking out the dreadnought.
He saved the entire fleet, yes.
So the film is telling us those things can destroy the Raiders at very large range, meaning that if the dreadnought had come with them when they did the ambush, then the Raiders would be destroyed.
Why would Leia call them back? Is she just an idiot?
This is the thing. So you said that Leia slapped him, and by virtue of Leia slapping him, you believe that he's done something reckless as opposed to Leia being wrong.
It's more so about considering the events yourself, the variables, the choices made by which characters with what information, and concluding what made sense with strong references instead of simply believing it made sense because the story told you it does. There is, however, a common counterargument that is highlighted during these sorts of discussions. Just because you wouldn't make that decision doesn't mean the character wouldn't have. The irony being that a writer told them that this character would make this decision and they bought it for that reason alone. They treat the story as law, whether or not it provides contradictive information to the viewer. Many apologists have now taken up the defense that this decision was indeed faulty on Holdo's part, but that she was established that way and thus it plays out consistently in terms of character. Think about that for a moment. Instead of accepting that this is a poor choice from the writers to push the drama, they are resolved to justify the nonsensical writing by arguing that a character that is in charge of the entire resistance force has the same level of intelligence as Homer Simpson.
Every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain. Remember when I took that home winemaking course and I forgot how to drive?
So why is this relevant? Well, now we also have Hux being established as a cold and efficient general in the first movie, but he's made into
And that's what we want them to do.
And the justification is fast becoming that of, he's stupid. He was always stupid. There's an episode of The Simpsons called "'Tis the 15th Season" where Homer has promised to buy his family a Christmas tree with money he recently came into while they buy gifts for each other. However, Homer discovers a talking astrolabe with several technological abilities impressing him immediately. They're essentially useless features to both he and his family, but he ends up buying it regardless.
This is our finest talking astrolabe. It also comes with a notepad and pens worked upside down.
He justifies it as a choice the family could benefit from and only later realizes how selfish it was and attempts to make up for it in the rest of the episode. Now, does it make sense that Homer would purchase that astrolabe after a salesman spends a few seconds explaining its benefits? Homer Simpson is one of the iconic representations for stupidity. It is the foundation of his character. He's not a general of the largest force ever seen in the universe, nor is he an admiral. He is your average Joe, but far stupider, and he will make choices that do not benefit himself or his loved ones if he's convinced of its value thanks to his lack of critical thinking. And so the equivalent with Homer would be to have him show relatively
to get them to walk more through the center of the road.
Plot, though his moments of intelligence are usually played for a joke. Trying to convince your audience that there is strong writing because a character makes a blatant mistake by design when they've been contradictively shown to be rather intelligent will cause cognitive dissonance in your viewer. If you need someone to make stupid decisions, then use a character that's been established that way. If you need someone to make intelligent decisions, then use a character that's been established that way.
We would be honored if you would join us.
In conclusion, Admiral Holdo and General Hux are not Homer Simpson. I'm glad we discussed that. Moving on, Snoke then says that Luke Skywalker will give rise to additional Jedi, and that is why they must find the droid before it ends up in the hands of the Resistance. That way, they can get to Luke first and kill him. Hux then recommends destroying the rebellion with their new weapon to cripple the Resistance and prevent them from ultimately reaching Skywalker. Snoke agrees, and that leaves me utterly bewildered. person we've never met wants to find and kill another person we haven't seen for decades and plans to knock out the galactic government to do so. Okay, why? Because he might train Jedi? It's not like it's an instant process. Well, it's not supposed to be, but well, you know what? Right there is just proof that you don't need Luke to create an army of Jedi anyway. It seems to me that Snoke is only after Luke because of how much the audience knows and loves Luke on a meta level. This lets the writers skip over establishment and invent a high-stakes situation on name recognition alone. There are no Jedi aside from Luke, and we know that he's isolated himself to an island that he intends to die on. So what threat is Luke at this point? Especially when he's nowhere near the good guys or the bad guys. What interactions did the First Order and Luke Skywalker even have, considering that Finn has barely any clue who the heroes of 30 years ago are, outside of recognizing Han as a rebellion general? And he was raised in the First Order. Well, either way, apparently Luke will begin training new Jedi the moment he's back, and Jedi are all that stand in the way of Snoke despite his awesome power. But like, why wouldn't Snoke understand why Luke left when Kylo was Luke's student and he is now loyal to Snoke? Surely Snoke knows that Luke wants nothing to do with
Why? Why would they walk and then hit across the road?
Who is Luke to Snoke? Who is Snoke to the Jedi? It would be unreasonable to expect answers to these questions so soon after the first scene with Snoke, but bafflingly they aren't even close to being answered 2 movies later. Regardless, Snoke decides that Hux is right and they must prevent Luke from being contacted, meaning that in this scene they are talking about the erasure of the galactic government,
4 or 5 steps probably.
Militia-style armies of the organization that
This is the pain of making Machinima in Arma.
Solely to prevent them from finding Luke Skywalker. This is being explained by the writers because it justifies the need to destroy the Republic now rather than any of the other years prior to the events of this film. The First Order
this
really
maybe
doesn't
just go
need a
straight
reason
across.
beyond domination. They want to rule as the newly reformed empire. So why make this about Luke? You could simply say that the weapon has been completed in the last few hours, and therefore we can enact our evil plans and destroy the other faction. Hux says that he believes now is the time to use the weapon to destroy the Republic, thus cutting off support to the Resistance, thus preventing the Resistance from reaching Skywalker. I don't know if you noticed, but the target list is completely backwards in terms of justification. Instead of stopping Skywalker's discovery...
If you were standing on Planet Killer, Starkiller Base, you would probably get cancer. Standing that close. At the very least. If not like radiation sickness or something.
He returns or trains new Jedi to fight them. The reason this is backwards is twofold. The writers are concerned about recognition from the audience, while also looking to have a few planets explode in a justified manner in this story. Having the plot be focused on destroying the Republic, which makes the most sense, will give them their explosion, but most of the audience will be wondering, what even is the Republic? Is it like the Resistance? What would it mean for them to be gone? And so the end goal for both factions is reaching Luke Skywalker, making the plot very easy to follow.
Luke Skywalker. Luke. Master Luke.
Luke
Skywalker.
Luke is a Jedi. Luke.
Luke Skywalker. Master Luke. Master Luke. Luke Skywalker! Oh, you gotta be kidding me!
They needed a Luke Skywalker-type goal to return to in key moments of the film to remain on track. Full-on battles and the destruction of planets are simply neat spectacles along the way. Die-hard Star Wars fans will be especially confused, since the Republic should be spread as such that a single system being destroyed shouldn't even be able to cripple them. Not that we can know any of this, since the state of the world has been avoided by the story thus far. Honestly, the structure of this scene is completely bizarre, but it's done so fast and in an evil baddie scheming sort of way that it mostly escapes scrutiny and we accept the goals of the bad guys almost entirely. Snoke says there's been an awakening in the Force, and that the droid is currently with Kylo's father, Han Solo, on the Millennium Falcon, and he couldn't have read that line for the audience more deliberately.
The droid we seek is aboard the Millennium Falcon, in the hands of your father, Han Solo.
Kylo obviously knows that Han is his father. The people who don't would be us. because that connection alone will facilitate the biggest payoff in this movie. This kind of information could be understood subtly before being overt in later scenes through dialogue that shares alternative information or even a flashback, but they decided that we absolutely needed to understand this information now. In addition, there is an allusion to Sith training in this scene. It would have been interesting to explore that since no mainline Star Wars episode has gone into any depth about it, but what are you gonna do? A more interesting detail is that once Hux has offered his plan to Snoke and it's accepted, he gives Kylo quite the look, as if to say he favors my ideas. This again adds to their conflict, a conflict that would have benefited from development yet is dropped in favor of the boss-lackey dynamic in the sequel.
Our supreme leader is dead. We have no ruler.
We then cut back to the Millennium Falcon. The ship is in dire need of hyperdrive maintenance, and yet it is capable of flying through hyperspace, though there is an alert going on in the background that can apparently be quelled by ripping something out of the ship itself, something Rey refers to as a bypass, which is laughable, but the more contentious issue would be that Han is bewildered by the repairs of his own ship. Regardless, the drama is solved and everyone is safe. So let's talk about what was probably intended with this scene. See, everybody references this moment for the purposes of proving Rey's character writing to be extremely flawed, and it's evidence of her consistent acting style. Those criticisms are staggeringly accurate. However, if we ignore that subject for a moment, I want to explore an idea about writing, and more specifically, characterization. Put it on the screen so they know. The story was going for something important when these two met, and that is that Han is impressive to Rey. She knows about his achievements, about his legendary status, and possibly respects him more for his smuggling than his time as a general, being that there is potential camaraderie in her time as a scavenger. I imagine both jobs are quite tough and relatively thankless. She even cites his Kessel Run achievement as though she is a die-hard fan of his piloting. She then spends the time she has with him keeping up and trying to prove herself, often getting ahead. Rey is trying to impress what may very well be a hero to her, and so when he's in a position where his ship is falling apart, you could say that Han is actually panicked and she fixes it, doing something that she knows he didn't think of. And what is her potential hero's reaction?
I bypassed the compressor.
Rey has something of value to offer Han, and he's impressed, but he's not sure he likes it.
I think the point here is that Rey isn't getting the validation she wants from Han despite earning it, and that she is bonding to him rather quickly due to her desire for a parental figure. From what we've seen, there is room to infer that Rey might have wanted appreciation from her parents for what she's achieved while they've been gone, as if to prove why they never should have left her. You could say that potential is being applied to a stranger that she's quickly turning into a father figure thanks to his history likely acting as a story of hope in her unremarkable life. This could be brilliant if it were developed, if it were delivered over more time with more care, but there is only one conclusion to reach when judging this as a package. Rey's attachment to Han here and in the future is hollow, and if we reverse engineer it, we know that the writers rushed it for this payoff right here. It should go without saying, but when you want to create a hard-hitting, intellectually satisfying, emotional payoff, you need to build toward it first.
You have to earn it.
To meet, to understand each other, to learn from one another, to trust and rely on each other, all leading to that last goodbye.
I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
In The Force Awakens, a large amount of screen time is spent on the more dazzling side of storytelling, the running, the battles, the explosions, and death, providing the audience that blast of shock and awe. Unfortunately, this leaves those character elements very little time to become layered and detailed. I will go into a bit more depth for Han and Rey later, though there is a pattern to spot right now, and this is one of the more blatant examples of it. In order to make this scene hit the heartstrings in the audience, they needed to get Rey and Han connected on a personal level, and they needed
Not keep that much distance between them. There should be that much distance.
Han at his primary skill. Later, he provides her validation for that, despite being a reserved person by nature, and if you tie that to Rey's parental issues, we've accomplished the development in about...
They're crossing the street there.
You may think that was mostly scathing, but they did come up with some potential there, a pathway for these two characters to develop a relationship, but the idea can only go so
What if we put
far
the
without
jeeps a little further back?
without desperately desired time to flourish, not to mention the requirement of crippling Han's character. So, in exchange for a piece of development that will support a later event, what had to happen? Rey completes completed fundamental maintenance on the Millennium Falcon to prevent its destruction in such a way that Han Solo didn't understand it, meaning that the writers, as a byproduct of a different writing goal, just provided Rey yet another achievement. I've been alluding to this in certain sections of this series already, but this scene is an excellent example of a pattern. Rey has been stacking attributes as a result of her having to push the story forward, or she ends up developing character interactions, and by extension it provides her another ability, but her believability suffers every time this happens. For every exceptional talent that is added to her repertoire, she becomes less and less human. I'm not convinced that Rey was made superhuman by design, at first anyway. I think it's a byproduct of other decisions and they decided to run with it, evidenced by the fact that she is at her weakest when we meet her, and there is an implication that she has a tough journey ahead. Only from there, her power level starts to climb in leaps and bounds. There may have been a goal to keep her limited with a payoff at the end in terms of strength, but the writers have been depositing abilities into Rey when dealing with other writing goals. As a result, we have what is essentially an unstoppably powerful character in relation to this world, especially by the end. This kind of mistake is understood as common for many new writers when funneling themselves into their work through a character. They make a creature that is personable, caring, intelligent, impressive, useful, proactive, and loved by many, whether reasoned or not. These are preferable qualities, and when you combine them with a character that doesn't have any kind of lasting or significant failure or flaw, in addition to excelling in
Why is the AI pathfinding so shit?
You get what is commonly referred to as a Mary Sue, as I am sure many of you have heard already.
Could look okay.
Lawrence were trying to pour themselves into Rey? I have no idea. I'm not inside their heads, but I would say that there's plenty of evidence to assume something a little bit different. Rey seems to be a wish fulfillment character. She's not necessarily what JJ wants to be. She seems to be what the audience would want to be if they were in this universe, especially when looking back on the entire trilogy. She is personally trained by Leia. She helps get Luke back onto his hero track, not to mention adopting the Skywalker name. And last but not necessarily least, she's impressive to Han Solo. So let's focus on that one. She has provided the attribute of highly effective Millennium Falcon mechanic in order to set up this relationship with Han that will result in a significant payoff. This is something we can break down further once we have more examples. For now, let's shift to the character as a whole. Rey is exiting the introductory stage of the story in prep for the latter portions, but she has nothing in terms of limits or mistakes to keep in mind. The coming payoffs will only provide her character even more power, making less and less sense. To make this easier to understand, we can compare her with the deuteragonist of the story, Finn. Yeah, it means like secondary to the protagonist, but still kind of a protagonist as well. Put it on the screen so that... Anyway, at this point in the film, we've received quite a few of Rey's attributes, whether they make sense or not. She's been scavenging alone in effective ways for a very long time, despite the harsh and dangerous environment. She's been rescuing others despite the very real risks. She's been protecting said others even when offered a strong trade. She has quite a formidable talent in combat despite her build and lack of teacher. She is resourceful and calm under pressure. She is an extremely talented Millennium Falcon pilot despite her own claims and having never flown it previously. She's multilingual despite the severe lack of practicality for Wookiee as a language on Jakku. She shows an intelligent use of the tools at her disposal. She shows an intimate knowledge of the Falcon's functionality despite never having flown it. She has an awareness of the precautions and fixes taken for coolant leaks, fuel pumps, and ignition compressors, topping it off with a vicious tearing of a component that apparently saves the day, all to the surprise and lack of understanding of Han Solo, the longtime owner of the ship itself. We're going to explore the origin behind these traits when we pass the plot in a few years, but I must point out that this cavalcade is after a mere 52 minutes of the film, of which Rey appears in a fraction of. Rey is downright impressive in each scene as time goes on. As a result, an audience can wonder what her purpose or message as a character is. Perhaps she is proof that you can be incredible without learning a thing. You can have massive, untapped talent while also being extremely kind, intelligent, and heroic. Well, we'll get to that aspect in a sec. For now, let's jump to Finn. Finn has shown us his very own attributes. He cannot stand meaningless death, but he's smart enough to try and hide it. He can't stand innocents being tortured and thus saves a prisoner. Unfortunately, unfortunately he doesn't manage to stay under the radar. He pulls off the rescue successfully until he gets distracted and it causes the ship to be shut
I'm gonna
down.
slow that down.
He flees to a local village and struggles to stay alive, though he does just manage to pull it off by finding a less than preferable water reserve. Upon being hunted down, he takes a strong hit to the face and is interrogated. He manages to lie successfully and then attempts to take control of the situation. He then happily synergizes with a local and uses his brief knowledge to escape the situation he's in, leading to him trying to evade a selection of living meatballs and almost dying yet again.
Dead zone increase on
Still maintaining some dignity,
options.
intelligence, and a decisive nature despite falling over consistently and generally looking like a bit of a fool most of the time. He is decent with a blaster, courageous at times, if not confusing, and ultimately very flawed. This is simplistic, yet it has so much more nuance and potential than Rey. It isn't to say it's as simple as having adversity or choices. You can have character writing go wrong for so many reasons. You could, inadvertently, 180 your character and their traits without progression in order to serve your story a higher purpose, ultimately assassinating the character in favor of your own ideals, whether or not they had choices to make or adversity to overcome. Another would be having a character actively learn lessons about something specific that does not correlate with an important choice later in the story. This is arcing their character without an informing setup,
like that.
cause and effect, despite there being a choice and adversity to overcome. How about having characters portrayed as one thing despite all of the evidence pointing to another? This can disjoint the assessment an audience would make, a conflict of what the story is showing and what the story is saying. This brings us to a nonsensical reality whether a choice or adversity is present or not. These are just standard broad issues, but a long character story with plenty of development, payoffs, and details is why most of us love watching this stuff. We love watching the journey. You can connect to these people as if they were real, or at the very least respect who they are and how they got there. When you look back at the journey of layered, developed yet consistent characters in fiction, you will cling to, or at the very least reference, a lot of their major moments. Times they had to make tough decisions, and times where they show a side to themselves we could only have previously inferred.
And then they made me that shit. Do not move.
Good shit.
Instead, I let you live. Because you're a Lannister.
Instructed by my government to come.
The magics you channeled are more ferocious and primal than anything you can hope to understand, and you are lucky to be alive, you rank, arrogant amateur.
You're right. I'm very powerful, and maybe it's not such a good idea for you to piss me off.
Many great characters have many of these payoffs, but the moments mean very little without the journey that brought them there, the development that builds a stage for these payoffs to be intellectually satisfying.
Okay, what we want to do is fucking fix this guy here. Figure out what his problem is. We put him over here, like behind all the rest of his dudes. Open fire. Let that. But honestly, we'll worry about this tomorrow. I'm gonna end it here. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. What do we want to call it? What do we want to call it? Oh, yeah, there's the Russian and something else YouTube comments. I set it to you can't chat unless, or you can't comment unless there's unless you're subscribed for 5 minutes. So I guess that didn't fix it.